Capitol Hill with 5 cabinet secretaries testifying about the role of infrastructure. Among them, Agriculture Secretary Secretary Perdue. RFD-TV's Sarah Mock joins us live from Washington, D.C. with the latest. Sarah.
Well, good morning, Janet. We are here, had a big hearing this morning, like as you said, had those 5 secretaries there with Senator John Thune. He's the chairman of the Commerce Committee, hosting a hearing this morning on infrastructure. Now, those 5 secretaries, Secretary Chow from the Department of Transportation, Rick Perry from the Department of Energy, Wilbur Ross from Commerce, and of course, Secretary Secretary Perdue, along with the Labor Secretary Acosta, of course, were joined by the Commerce Committee to talk about that infrastructure plan that the Senate is just about to set out to build after the White House proposed it. Now, of course, there were a couple of big themes that came up over and over again, one of them being rural broadband, which Secretary Perdue outlined and emphasized in his opening remarks.
Today, the internet, high-speed internet, is that interstate highway of the 21st century. And we need a ubiquitous interstate or high-speed internet system across this country, not only for the farmsteads and the rural towns, but the fields of America. When you look at the technology that exists in Illinois for precision agriculture, real productivity, an example, a real-world example is with high-speed internet, sub-inch technology of GPS and the satellites, we can get about a 20 bushel per acre increase with almost half the inputs. You talk about real productivity increase. There are products on the shelf today that manufacturers are waiting to deploy when we have the opportunity for broadband, ubiquitous broadband activity. And frankly, this will only spur more as we get there.
Now, of course, there were also a lot of questions about broadband from senators who want to know how the USDA's Rural Utility Service is determining those unserved and underserved areas. Now, this has been becoming a more and more critical issue as there's been some suspicion and some stories on Capitol Hill that those funds for the Rural Utility Service are not going to the areas that need them most. Now, of course, funding was kind of the big theme of the morning, the big criticism from the left on this, the overall infrastructure plan, as the White House proposed only $200 billion for a proposed plan of $1.5 trillion, expecting state and local governments to provide up to 80% matching funds for projects that they're interested in doing. To Democrats, that's a completely unworkable idea, and they're hoping to see more increased funding on the federal side. Now, of course, streamlining of the permitting process was a big plus that secretaries were bragging about today. There are a number of issues, and the Senate is just in its very early stages of planning out a bill that will one day go before the House and the Senate. He's very interested, though, and I think kind of the point of today's hearing was to emphasize an interagency approach in working with all the secretaries in all the agencies to really get a plan that works. We'll be following this story throughout the week and later into this year. But until then, back to you, Janet.
As always, thank you, Sarah. Again, Sarah Mock in Washington, D.C. Well, it's unclear when Congress will put forth an infrastructure proposal. The president's plan calls for increasing funding from state and private sources, a move that some see as controversial.